Admissions Geek. Today, we are lucky enough to have Dr. Isaac Carter, who is a specialist within the Black Lives Matter community and is such a fantastic person to get to have this opportunity to work with. And I would let him introduce himself. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Glad to be a part of this conversation. A little bit about me. I guess I will introduce myself in a way that allows you to understand my experience, especially within the academy. So I've worked at 5 different campuses over the course of my career, about 25 years. And one thing that consistently has happened, as I walk across the campus and I meet faculty and staff and students and families and parents who don't know me, I'm often asked 2 questions. One is, am I a coach? And 2, do I work is it grounds or cafeteria food services? There's never the default that I might be a professor or a scholar or a dean or, a director, which are all things I've been. So that really kind of encapsulates like why Black Lives Matter, and it mattered way before this current echo of it. It's been mattering since this inception of this country and the Black lives that were built upon. So we have to start looking at our lives in a more critical eye. And unfortunately, it takes really unfortunate incidents like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the unfortunate long list of others that have come before that have sacrificed their lives. I think that one of the things that we have to do in this moment is let's not let those sacrifices be in vain. What can we do to forward our society and deal with America's original sin, that is racism and slavery in America?
Mm-hmm. That is so important right now. And how has Black Lives Matter and this huge movement happening right now highlighted the issues with institutionalized organizations? Some of these universities and colleges or different places that are a part of this institution, how has this movement really highlighted some of these problems?
I think that the movement, ever since the death of the murder of Trayvon Martin, was trying to bring light to the situation that has happened, that there was some false sense of progress that had happened in our American psyche, that we thought because we had some people on TV who make a bunch of money, or people in office that make a bunch of money, and ultimately we had a president that was Black, we've arrived. We're at the mountaintop. We see the promised land. No, we're still climbing. And we have much more climbing to go. And we got a lot of weight on our shoulders of this climb. So I think the significance of this particular moment, though, has to be that in other incidents, we saw the shooting, the snap reaction, maybe 20, 30 seconds. With George Floyd, we saw a man for about 7 minutes in custody of cops, which were 4 of them around, slowly plead for his life until he died.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to see that. And I believe that when people see that, I think it's hard. If you watch the whole 7 minutes and 46 seconds, how do you look into that face and not see yourself? If you would have been there, what would you have done? There are people who were there who took the pictures and photos, but ultimately the man's life was extinguished for no reason other than fitting the profile and being subject to this direct authoritarian policing force. And so this is what the shame of it is. And then we look at higher education and their statements. Higher education has to make more than statements. The equity gap still exists. We see not a lot of movement in terms of who are program chairs, department chairs, deans, vice presidents, provosts, presidents. We haven't seen the gap really close. So we have to ask ourselves, is it that people and other than white heterosexual males can't be presidents? Or is it that we're in a society that's not ready to honor different forms of leadership and give opportunity to people who surely earned it by their longevity in their careers and their skills and their accomplishments, but are still denied the opportunity because somehow, somewhat in that position can't see anybody in the position other than someone who looks like them.
And I know you're a parent, but what should parents be doing in this movement right now? How should they be what should they be telling their kids? What should the kids be thinking? What should parents, how can they become a part of this as their kid, who's a diverse student, is going out into a new place where they're going to need to question every single part of their identity?
So what I hope to do, or hope to do in terms of as a parent yourself, you hope to make sure they grow up with a sense of self and pride. And I think all parents need to make sure they understand their history and their culture and where they come from. The language, if a different language was spoken, those are all things that are important. So when a kid steps on campus, a young adult steps on campus, they are not searching for identity. They have a clean foundation for what their identity is. And they can add elements of other things they're interested into their identity. They can grow out some of their understandings of masculinity or their sexuality or their race as they religious thought as they continue throughout the process. But we can't and we shouldn't send our children to schools with no foundation. And so, like in terms of Black, as an example, if the extent of their knowledge of their Black history is Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X, that's probably insufficient for them navigating on a campus, especially if the campus is a PWI or ran like a PWI. And we have to start having our parents help our students and understand how to be on a campus. And then additionally, we have to help them understand how to network on campus and take advantage of the resources, the multicultural affairs offices or the other programs they have, student support program, get themselves engaged on the campus. Because what I've seen throughout my career, students can have a horrible experience, but the student who's willing to tell the president, the board about their experience and continually put that into their face so they understand they have to address it, those students get their problems addressed more than those who sit back and complain about the same thing to their peers, but don't do anything actionable that requires the institution to respond.
I mean, this reminds me of when I was, in college, going out, having a good time. And then if you had saggy pants, if you had a bandana, if you had a backwards hat, you couldn't go in the bar. They tell you no. And do you think this has been shifting? I mean, can people express themselves more now that we're talking about it more? Or do you think the expression's just gotten more limited?
Well, I think the expression has gotten more limited and it's gotten less exclusive. I have seen where diversity was very much about race, and then I think as we grew to understand how other people or other populations are underrepresented and marginalized, we started to be inclusive. But then our inclusivity has gone to a point in my mind that people are considering like diversity of thought or political party as some kind of actual diversity identity. I'm not trying to say people don't believe certain things in those categories. I'm just saying when you're driving in a car or trying to get in the bar, no one cares about the diversity of your thought. That's not what they're looking at to decide whether or not to gain entry into this space. So we gotta be a little bit more honest about what are the true characteristics of protecting people who are in categories that are often targeted and marginalized because of those categories. And other categories that are up for debate, but unless you self-expose yourself and say, hey, this is me, there's not really a lynching movement for your feeling about vegetarianism versus people who eat meat. And I'm not saying it's not important. I'm not saying it doesn't have a cultural impact. I'm just saying it ain't the same thing as race, class, and gender and sexuality, where people have been actively sought out and targeted because of those identities.
And when students are applying to college, should they be advertising, their identity or advertising that they worked in a Black Lives Matter community or reference to their identity? Do you think this is going to help kind of push universities to be more diverse, or is that just, adding more to the gaps of the issues?
No, I think it's very important for students to identify who they are. I think it's very important if they're active in Black Lives Matter or service opportunities or some other group like the YWCA that's ending racism and empowering women. It's a part of their slogan. So like any organization that these students are a part of, they should definitely highlight them. And I think if now more than any other time, definitely highlight your identity. And then, but besides highlighting your identity, the students should do a little research and say, my identity is important because currently You only are graduating 6% or whatever percent of this population. And why if I come there, then I want to be not only know that I want to be allowed to be accepted, but I also want to know what you're going to do to support me as I look at my options. And if all students are doing that, schools then have to respond to these family and student requests about what are you doing? And so since Black Lives Matter, and since this instance has taken place, and I saw your statement that you're committed to supporting diversity and being anti-racist, okay, what does your faculty look like? What does your curriculum look like? What does your leadership look like? No, not just in the diversity office, not just in the TRIO program, no. Cabinet level member people, what's the diversity of the organization? Tenured faculty, what is the diversity of the organization? High level directorships, what is the diversity of the organization? In the community, what kind of stances will be taken by local policing other than law enforcement, or even on-campus police? These are questions that parents should be asking. The college admissions counselor, they should be asked for a different set of stops along the admissions tour to make sure they are highlighting places where the students can see themselves and see others who are like them, to make sure they have a place to express and identify with on campus, and be more demanding. I think that pressure comes from externally, from the outside, for families and students, and then come from the old political pressure of how we deal with racism, as well as a campus community that's trying to say that we want to do the right things. If everybody does what they say they do, and everybody tries to live out their statements, then it shouldn't be a problem. Mm-hmm. But I'll wait to see.
And let's push a little farther. I mean, we talked about, you mentioned really clearly about like questions parents should be asking, questions students should be considering to pick a strong university that matches their identity. But let's push a little farther. Let's say, you know, that student graduated, which is really great, especially for everyone as a minority, a diverse student. And what are some of the career statistics of students of color right now?
Well, that's one of the things is that we're still finding, if you look at census data, unemployment rates are higher among people of color than they are for majority members of our community. There's still a pay gap in equity in terms of gender. So I think in addition to the criteria of this that I mentioned earlier for examining the school, career expectations and outcomes should be part of what students look forward to. You know, how many students do get internships? And there's a disparity in that. You know, a disparity whether they're paid or unpaid. So these disparities are not accidents. When you start to disaggregate the data, and it's consistently showing that Black and brown students are the ones that in these categories behind white students, because obviously there's a problem. You have to be able to start to honestly talk about the problem, and then universities have to be very, very diligent in going out and making new partnerships. I'm not saying take away partnerships that already exist, but ask those existing partnerships, how can you increase the hiring of diverse students? And then seek out additional partnerships that definitely are looking for diverse students, graduates, and that they want to put into their pipeline and help grow their businesses and organizations. And schools should be intentional in that process. We shouldn't rely upon a student to do that. We're taking their money, or we're providing them this education, but is not part of the education, has the correct expectations attached to it. The university and colleges should be providing those resources to make sure that that young person walks across the stage, not with just the celebratory higher degree and have to go live with mom and dad after it. They don't have a job and they can't afford to live on their own. It should include some kind of coaching and some resources so they walk across that stage with grad school opportunities or job opportunities in hand, and they have a sense of self, and their identity has only been enhanced, not harmed, in their college experience.
Enhanced, not harmed. I hope everyone listening is taking notes, because that's the truth. So my last question is, in one sentence, what would you tell students of color about applying to college in 2020? Like, what is one thing that you're like, if I was a student this modern age, applying in all of this crazy time where tests are optional, school was part-time, I may be a senior that didn't even finish my senior year, and I'm in an impoverished community, what's one sentence that you would tell a student of color currently applying in this current situation?
Find a college or university that wants you, and they demonstrate that desire of your applicant candidacy because they're willing to pay for all of your education and or your housing. That's what you want. You want an organization that has invested in you So they see you as a person that has promise, and this should be something in this campus climate with the equities all around. All the schools should be competing for qualified candidates. So make sure you find a place that not only be accepted, but you're happy to accept their full scholarship that goes along with their admissions. Go for free. Pay for grad school. And if you go do it smart, you have to pay for grad school later. You find an employer who's willing to do it for you as well. We don't have to be slaves to other things. And I guess the only thing caveat with that is that you have to be willing to go somewhere else. Maybe it's your school your friend went to, and your neighborhood, near home. That might not be the school that wants to pay you. Go. Because as much as there is growth that we need to have in society in terms of how we deal with race, there are other things you can grow in. So as men, you can grow and learn about patriarchy and sexism. Maybe go get a women's studies minor while you're in college. Go somewhere that has that kind of curriculum so that you can continue to grow as a person as well. Like, racism is a huge problem in our society, but we cannot forget about sexism and patriarchy and other identity special LGBT populations that are also directly targeted through violence and other surveillance. And it's important that we stand in solidarity with others if we expect people to stand in solidarity with us.
Be willing to go somewhere else. I think that's so important because everyone thinks, I say everyone, but a lot of people think that I need to go to that community college down the street from my house because that's what everyone else is doing. I don't want to leave my friends, so I need to do the online Cambridge thing, and I don't deserve to go to another university that's in Iowa or Indiana. I mean, what do you tell those students that are afraid to leave their communities?
Without Frederick Douglass' quote, if you don't know who Frederick Douglass is, Google it. You should know. I'm not going to even tell you. A very important man in our American history. There is no success without struggle. I think people can't take on life that is going to be easy and rainbows and unicorns all the time. I mean, the struggle is real. That's why it's not just a saying. It's a real life quote that has material historicism behind it. And our struggle is still ahead of us because we haven't fixed our society. So I would just tell students that, become comfortable with being uncomfortable. Stretch yourself. Apply to the school you might not even think that's going to take you. Apply to the school, but they have a cool program that you somehow fear because of you've been told and given messages about who you are and what you can learn, and what your capacities are. I am working on a book, and one of the things that I'm trying to tell people is we can't waste opportunities by still focusing on the past. But I feel like many of us take the past and all the negative messages and we put them up around us in our consciousness, and we're constantly driven by those. It's either driven like, see somebody told me this, so I'm going to achieve, or see somebody told me this, and now I'm not going to do this. What about if you just had to take the past negative and think about all your positive attributes and say, oh, because I'm a studious person, I can achieve this. Because I'm willing to work hard, I can achieve that. We always foreground the things that are negative instead of foregrounding the future opportunity that we have in front of us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Isaac Carter. This was a phenomenal explanation, and I really hope that a student, a diverse student, a non-diverse student, a parent listening to this is just inspired to ask the questions that people are afraid to ask right now. Thank you so much for your time. I truly appreciate it.
I truly appreciate the opportunity for this, and I would glad to come back on any area topic that you feel like would be helpful in creating some good dialogue and hopefully some opportunities for learning.
Thank you so much.